Hello, YouTube. We're here to talk about stuff we've been consuming this month. We did this for the patrons already, Clay, but here we're going to give a free one to the YouTube community who support us so happily. This is usually where we talk about something that we've been watching or listening or playing or whatever, and that isn't fitting into the Star Trek horror show Batman the Animated Series mold. And here we are to talk about it. Clay, how are you first?
Good. Well, I can tell you I just consumed an unhealthy amount of buffalo chicken mac and cheese. Damn it. I thought I was going to be able to keep a straight face. I figured they pay for that one. No one's going to hear that story. May as well do it again on this one.
We should just repeat it and see if the patrons actually get fired up about it. Well, I guess we can tease. You talked about wrestling, and I talked about music in the patron one. So now we're going to talk about wrestling music.
Yeah, hell yeah. I have thoughts. Let's do it.
No song is ever better than Ass Man.
You know why Ass Man is the best song?
Because it has. You can have your joke.
No, it's not a joke.
Well, it's got. Okay, sure. Well,
I have a real theory.
I think you've told me this, unless you come up with another reason why it is. Yeah,
it's the best song because it has a bridge.
Yeah,
it's the only wrestling song that has a bridge, and nobody ever hears it.
Yeah,
because Billy Gunn was hardly ever out there long enough to get to that point in the song.
Right. He's not making a grand entrance letting you hear 3.5 minutes of Ass Man come.
And then by the time he was doing with the DX music. So it's like whoever wrote the Ass Man music felt so strongly about the concept of this man who was all about ass that he wrote a bridge that no one would ever hear.
I love to kick him. I love to stick him.
Love to squeeze him. That's the other thing. I think he repeats he's like, I love to squeeze him. I love to knead him. I love to something. I love to squeeze him. It's like, well, okay. Well, just double making sure everybody knows.
I love to shove him. I'm going to kick him. Yeah, I love that song, unironically. It's very funny and fits Billy Gunn's wrestling persona perfectly.
It very much does, yes.
Better than what I'm told his wrestling card was. Told me that his motto was, I'll make you famous, which I don't think I ever heard Billy Gunn say anything remotely like that. So,
well, his finishing move, I believe, is called the Fame-asser.
Fame-asser. Yeah, Fame-asser. Yeah. Yep. Never heard the phrase, though, which which seems a lot worse. X-Pac had a phrase, too, that I never heard him fucking say. I don't think catchphrases are really what the wrestlers should be about. I think that's kind of a weakness.
It's a blessing and it's a curse. If you get a good one, it can be great, but if you're every now and then you've got Stone Cold Steve Austin who introduces the what chant.
Yeah.
And effectively ruined wrestling for about 25 years.
Was that Stone Cold who introduced that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Because people would...
He balanced out 316, says, I just kicked your ass with the what chant, which that must have come around in the time of Budweiser or something, right? I
don't know.
Did that not correlate to those ads?
That happened after I stopped watching it for the most part, because I didn't understand what was going on when I came back, and the entire crowd would chant what anytime somebody paused during a promo, which is real
juice killer, as they say. Let's talk about content consumption, what we've been doing this month. I'll go first. You went first during the Patreon one.
Sure.
I'll give you time to think. I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2. It's been fantastic. And the interesting thing about Red Dead Redemption 2, outside of the fact that the game is very good and beautiful world, and you sound like an old man going back into something. If you don't play video games all that often, you go back to something like Red Dead, you're like, wow, look at the rabbit's ears.
I've started playing video games not super frequently, but more in the past maybe 5 years than I have in the past 20 or so. And I still do that.
Yeah.
Where I play Injustice 2 and I'm like, look at these costumes. Well, the Superman's never looked better.
They should have this guy be in the movies.
Yeah.
The thing that's funny about video games is I fell off it for a ways too, mostly kid related in the podcast, and I don't have I can play maybe one night a week of Red Dead, with the schedule that we have. But the thing that's nice is when you go back and the consoles are a few years old and the games are old, everything's like $5 and you get to enjoy it for super cheap and play through it, and you're still kind of impressed that that's the graphics. You don't need cutting edge, because cutting edge to me is just better than what I expected something to look like.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but everything's super cheap. I got the Hitman series for like $10 or something. That's hours and hours a game for so cheap.
I had them at the time when they came out, but when I got my PS4, I bought the first 2 Arkham Asylum games. It was like $5 for both of them.
Yeah,
and they were both like remastered and shit. And it's like, all right,
nothing. There's no need to buy this stuff at launch.
Yeah,
everyone hemming and hawing about your PlayStation 5. You can't buy it on the internet. Just wait 6 years.
Yeah, that's what I do every time now.
You'll be able to play it. Yeah, Red Dead's great, and Red Dead has a photo mode in it, which I'm having a lot of fun with. I don't take good photos, but
could you explain that? Because I saw you mentioning it, but I don't understand what it is.
So the photo mode in Red Dead, anyway, and I think it operates the same for a lot of games, is that when you pause the game or you enter photo mode, it freezes whatever's happening in the game, and your camera becomes freely able to move around the scene. So you can,
I see. Okay.
You can move in 3-dimensional space around your character, around another character. You can. They add all the like aperture settings and lens focus, and like you can add blur background, like bokeh and stuff to the backgrounds. Mm-hmm. You can add filters. You can take down saturation. So it's basically a video version of Photoshop with a live camera thing that you can do.
Damn.
So it's kind of fun. I'm not very good at it yet, but some people take like really remarkable pictures in it where it's all about playing the game until you get to a moment that you're like, this will be a great picture, and awkwardly hitting pause on whatever you're doing, hoping to try to line the thing up so that you can then take a good picture of whatever the setting is. But it's for games that look really pretty, it's a neat non-gameplay thing to do to take a picture. And it's weird just because it's so much like real photography, which is a semi-loose hobby I still kind of have, where you'll try for 30 minutes to make something look good, and you're like, this will just never look good. You're like, you see something, you're like, that's going to look amazing when I take a picture of that thing. And then you spend 30 minutes, you're like, maybe this is the wrong angle. Maybe this thing's too high. Maybe this is too low. Maybe I need to like lay down and take it. And then you're like, oh, never mind. It's just not a good picture at all. So that's the end of that story.
Or it's a lens thing where it's like, oh, well, I don't have a telephoto lens on my camera, so I can't. I know what I want it to look like, but
this technology has failed me. Yeah,
what you're not recognizing is that picture you've seen before somewhere else has a very specific like lens compression and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
So anytime you try to take a picture of the moon, you're outside, you had a drink or something, and it's like, oh man, the moon looks so cool, and then you try to take a picture, and it looks as far away as it actually is.
Yeah, well, that's a nighttime moon of the shot that someone put the long exposure of 5 minutes for it to take one picture, and it came out beautifully. And you're like, my iPhone can't take a picture of the moon. What's wrong with it? Yeah, and Red Dead's great. Outside of that, I'm still very early, but it's been fantastic. Hell of an accomplishment for a video game to build a world like that.
I'm looking forward to getting around to that one because I loved the first one.
First one is really good too. Yeah. This one it's the same. It's just bigger and but bigger in a way that's not annoying. Like a lot of things get really big. Like I don't know if you ever played Grand Theft Auto's San Andreas. Like I love Vice City, but San Andreas, which was the South Central LA spin on things, it had too much sprawl to it. That's when they're like, your character can get fat if you eat too much. And it's like, I don't need that in this character.
It's so detailed. There's a metabolism setting. That
and if you run too much, you get skinny. And it's like, well,
sure.
I'm not. It's a bridge too far.
I felt the same way. I was so excited for LA Noire when they announced that because, whatever the last Grand Theft Auto was this huge open world thing. It's amazing. Oh, they're doing this noir era LA one. That's going to be fantastic. And then I
solve a mystery too. On top of
you solve a mystery.
Yeah.
And I played it, and it was so boring. It was so boring because you know why? Because you play a cop.
Yeah.
And for some reason,
solving a mystery.
Yeah. For some reason, they didn't let you play like a cop from a noir book where you can still like shoot people and break the law. You had to play like a cop. Yeah. And so you couldn't do the Grand Theft Auto stuff. And it was just too specific. Like they had this Do you remember the interrogation scenes?
Yeah,
when you
it's a game
like,
built around like
yeah.
facial recognition and ticks and things like that in the interrogations, right? So I think that game was famous for it had extremely realistic facial animations.
Yeah, it
that
did.
they wanted you to interrogate people. And when he gives you you get a clue, you're like, this character like rolls his eyes up when he's lying, and you go and you peg him on it and you say you're lying or whatever. But I don't know if that's as invigorating as running around in a tank in Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, and I didn't play it long enough to get good at that part, so I just found it to be a very frustrating game. I was very, very disappointed.
I think, that game also had very slow cars, right? Because they were trying to make it like a realistic driving game. So it's just basically driving around and obeying the traffic light laws as you're driving around or whatever. Yeah, that's it. Red Dead Redemption. It's a couple years old at this point. People have heard of it and stuff like that. I'm enamored with the photo mode and enamored with the game too, which is really good. Hopefully I'll have more thoughts about that after I finish it. But what do you have to say for this month for the YouTubers?
Well, just to round out the video game thing, I'm always amazed at how old games in my head that are still new actually are, because I started playing that Friday the 13th game maybe, I don't know, a handful of months ago, and I was looking stuff up online. It's like, oh, not only has this game been out for 4 years at this point, it has also basically been abandoned by the people who created it because of a lawsuit. Yeah. And so it's just like, it's kind of a dead zone. It's not completely dead, but it's not as lively as it once was. Yeah. But to me, it's like, wow, this is a good looking game. I remember when it launched, but that couldn't have been more than like a year or maybe 2 years ago.
That's the problem with those online games. Once the audience goes, you're kind of stuck with nothing at that point. I was just thinking, you played the Spider-Man. Spider-Man has a very famous photo mode in it.
Oh,
you
yeah.
take a lot of great photos in Spider-Man, and people have done. So what's up for you?
I was kind of bouncing around a couple things. My thing is not totally breaking away from the usual stuff we watch. But first, I just got this awesome, thanks to heads up from Kyle, listener Kyle. I got this awesome Vincent Price Blu-ray set.
Yeah.
Because we just covered The Abominable Dr. Phibes on Rotten Horror Picture Show, and I was bemoaning the fact that there wasn't a good Blu-ray release. It's kind of hard to get at this point at all. And he pointed me towards this thing, which had been up until recently out of print, like very famously out of print, where it was like $100 plus if you wanted to get a copy of this collection. Which, listen, I love physical media, but I'm not paying $100 for a Blu-ray. Mm-hmm. But it had Phibes on it, and it has Witchfinder General, which is another one we're going to do eventually, and it has Mask of the Red Death, which they're all really visually impressive. The more visually impressive movies that he did. So it's I thought it was a good grab. Recommend it to anybody who's interested in that stuff. But
where did you get it?
Just on Amazon. It's from Scream Factory. And you can get it through them, or you can get it on Amazon. It was like, I think it was like $45 or something. It was good deal for the number of movies you're getting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was watching Haunted Palace last night from that set, and I was just like, man, I wish they don't make movies like this anymore. They don't make gothic horror movies anymore, and I wish it was a style that would come back because they're so fun. Mm-hmm. And it's just it's a style that has not yet had a nostalgic renaissance, really, and it never really did, because they were really popular through like the 60s, like maybe through like probably the biggest heyday was in the 60s and maybe the 70s. And then once slashers came around, the gothic horror basically kind of fell off the map. And
how are you defining gothic horror? Like vampires is what I'm thinking of?
Yeah, not necessarily vampires, but like vampires would be
the type of it.
Yeah, like castle setting.
Yeah.
Or village type setting, or just something that's more stylized in that way. Yeah. Like I would say the most recent one they did was Crimson Peak. The Guillermo del Toro one is a very gothic horror movie. The Witch or the Vitch, or however you want to. Yeah, I guess so. Not totally in the way that I'm thinking. But, okay. But because that one was pretty bare bones and like what's the word I'm looking for? gritty, I guess. And I'm thinking of ones that have a little bit more like supernatural pageantry to them.
Sure, like a romantic romantic era, I guess. Just sort of that,
like a Frankenstein or something that it doesn't take place in a modern time or place. It takes place in Europe. Sure. Where it's just generalized Europe.
Our understanding of what Europe was like in the 1750s, that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like Haunted Palace. Haunted Palace is actually interesting because it's named after an Edgar Allan Poe story, but it's actually an adaptation of an H.P. Lovecraft story. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the first H.P. Lovecraft film adaptations. So it's weird to see Vincent Price in a movie that features the Necronomicon, and they name drop Arkham and Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth and stuff like that in an era where that wasn't really popular yet.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's kind of fun to see, but it's like it takes place in Arkham, Massachusetts. I don't know if they ever say Massachusetts, but in Arkham, but it's like a Gothic village type place where there's a big castle on a hill and all that kind of shit. And yeah, I just really like that style. It's a very when it's done really well, it can be very creepy, but it's also a very cozy style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it can't be too scary in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Hammer was really good at those, kind of finding that like middle ground where it's like a cozy Gothic horror that's kind of scary, kind of bloody, and kind of horny all at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's just a unique style of movie that doesn't really exist anymore. I'm not sure why it never really came back, but I guess there was just more demand for more realism generally in horror movies after the slashers showed up.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. I guess they just don't seem as versatile in some ways. That's just me spitballing. I don't know if that would be the case, but they seem like if you watch two of them in a row, you'd be like, wow, these are similar movies. Yeah,
well, I guess it's never really stopped any other subgenre.
No, it hasn't. That's why.
But it's like,
feels weird to say.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the Western a bit to me.
Yeah,
where it's something that was very popular for a fairly big period of time, but once it was over, and it being over is usually due to it being uprooted by a filmic style change. Like the Western kind of goes out of vogue in the 70s when everything gets a lot more gritty. I mean, there were gritty Westerns in the 70s, but like you weren't seeing as many Westerns in the 70s as you saw in the 60s, and you saw even fewer in the 80s, and they basically didn't exist by the 90s. And so it's very much a style choice that is, it feels anachronistic, even though people make period pieces all the time. For some reason, Westerns feel like anachronistic movies, and I'm not really sure why. And I think it's the same thing with these kind of Gothic horror movies. There's something that they feel more tied to a specific period of time, outside of the time that they take place
they're in.
Yeah, and it's so if they do it, it's usually like, oh, someone's doing a Western. This is interesting. What's that going to be like? Instead of it just being something that people kind of return to.
Yeah, that's a good point. So would you recommend the movie? What was the movie that did that? You called it something?
It was the one I was watching was called The Haunted Palace.
Palace.
The thing with the Vincent Price movies is you're kind of coming for him and you're staying for the kind of camp.
Yeah.
Because they're not like, you're not going to, if The Haunted Palace by Roger Corman starring Vincent Price is the first horror movie you ever watched, I don't know if you're going to come away in love with the genre.
Sure.
But if you're as a fan of his, which I am, it's just it's a part of a nice collection. Unfortunately, volumes 2 and 3 aren't really that great. I mean, they're fine, but they definitely kind of front loaded the first one.
Do you have The one you just held up, is that one of the volumes?
That's volume 1. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Volume 2 seems to still be out of print because that one is like $100+, but volume 3 you can get relatively cheaply. But yeah, this one's definitely front loaded. It's got Pit and the Pendulum, Mask of the Red Death, Fall of the House of Usher, and The Haunted Palace, which are all Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. And
sorry, is that a full movie for The Pit and the Pendulum?
Yeah.
How'd they turn that into a full movie?
Well, they base it very loosely on the
there is
on the Edgar Allan
pits.
Poe story. That's basically it. It's basically they've got the pit, they've got the pendulum, and then they fill an hour and 20 minutes before they get to it. And it's also got Dr. Phibes and Witchfinder General. So it's like, as far as his horror stuff goes, that's especially from like the 60s.
Yeah,
that's probably the best stuff there is out there. And yeah, I always like him. He's a good time. He can be very campy, but he always brings 100% to the stupid shit that he has to say. And I was laughing.
Jeffrey Combs of traditional acting.
Kinda, yeah. When I was watching Haunted Palace, I was saying to my girlfriend, I always love how you've got Vincent Price, who is taking this shit seriously, doing his thing, but delivering these. He's got a bit of camp to him, obviously, but he's delivering these lines fairly serious, like he believes what he's saying. And then there's another actor who is just like a guy that they got to play this role, who doesn't really give a shit about what's going on, and he's given this exposition scene, and in the Haunted Palace specifically, he's like, there's this book, it's called the Necronomicon, and it speaks of all these ancient horrors like Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth. And it's just like a guy from New York saying all this esoteric language, where you've got Vincent Price in that very specific voice and timbre, putting some stank on it. But then these other guys who are just like, we have to get out of here if we want to defeat the beast. It's like,
Hear the cue cards rustling in the background.
Yeah. Hearing it referred to as the Necronomicon was interesting. Yeah.
Regional accents in traditional horror lore. How we missed you. I guess that's it then for content consumption. Thanks very much. Red Dead Redemption and the Vincent Price Volume 1 collection from Hammer. Is that who this is?
No, it's I think they're all MGM movies. Oh. I think the linking thing is they're all AIP produced movies.
Gotcha.
Which is Roger Corman's company. Who is famous for saying he never made a movie that lost money, because most of them were made very cheaply.
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Don't need to say anything else. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. That's it. We do these every once in a while for the YouTube audience. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Continue supporting us on patreon.com/thepenskyfile if you want to hear about the wrestling and music thoughts that we had earlier this month and all the other podcasts that are up there at this point. And otherwise, Star Trek continues, Badass continues, Run Horror Picture Show continues, and we're done. Thanks very much. See ya.